Our celebration continues today with a two-part program. We begin with a tribute to the late Rodney Gilbert, actor, director, teacher, and tireless promoter for a more creative community. This afternoon, we will honor Rodney's life and creative spirit with poetry by Newark's own Mia X, and with the screening of Gladys Ben Simon's film, A Way Out, which illuminates Rodney's compelling life story. The program continues at 2:30 with the Newark Public Library's third annual Black Lives Matter-Newark panel discussion, which will examine the systemic changes our families and communities are facing today. And we have more Black History Month programs, and actually continues through April, so we hope you're able to come back and be with us for some additional programming. Alicia Souter, our host, is the Executive Director of the Institute of Music for Children in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and has over 20 years' experience of arts education. As a teaching artist, she has worked for organizations across New Jersey, including Arts Horizons, Playwrights Theater, the Paper Mill Playhouse, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, NJPAC, teaching, acting, and playwriting. She is passionate about the role the arts should play in young people's growth and development, and bringing the arts to underserved youth has been central to her work. Actively involved in the development of arts education on a statewide level, Ms. Souter serves as the chair of the Newark Arts Education Roundtable and co-chaired the 2014 Creative Elizabeth Call to Collaboration Initiative. Ms. Souter is also an international presenter, having been featured at education conferences in Guatemala, Germany, and South Africa. In 2013, she was a recipient of the Emerging Nonprofit Leader Award presented by the Center for Nonprofits and Fairleigh Dickinson University Center for Excellence. Please join me in welcoming Alicia Souter.
Thank you, and great afternoon, everyone. Great afternoon, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I feel blessed to be here today. I was really, I've been preparing all day so that I wouldn't, I feel blessed to be here today to honor someone who I have known for over 20 years, who I've spent hours and days and months with, and we met back in the 90s, and I hired his group Soul to come and perform at a school I was working at. And the moment we met, we became fast friends, and from that point on, we hired each other for various jobs. I was his boss, he was my boss. I directed him in many productions, including one that I had written. We also did presentations together and actually went to South Africa to present a workshop at a international conference together. Rodney and I have gone through thick and thin, and it's very hard still to believe that he is not here. And I often forget he is not here when I go to call him and then remember. But the beautiful thing, and one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here, is because when I do remember that he isn't here, I also remember everything he gave and left here for us all. And that is truly the profound thing, is that Rodney Gilbert impacted so many people, so many different types of people, little people and big people and older people and rich people and poor people, and it just amazes me. The depth that his spirit has reached, and knowing how important community and people were and remain to Rodney. I know for a fact that he is still with us and that he is still doing his work and impacting so many of us. And he believed in the importance of, first off, he loved the arts and he loved theater and went to see theater all the time and talked about it and knew it and did it. But he believed in all art, and he believed deeply in the importance of arts in urban communities, particularly his home community of Newark, which he loved. He loved Newark, and he fought for the rights of everyone in Newark. And he was always the reminder that we have to remember who's this for and what is this really about. And he would always, I also served with him on the Newark Arts Education Roundtable, and he would be the first person to say, children are dying, and we have to do something about that. And that's what he always spoke about, and that's what he tried, and he gave his life to change, and he did change so many lives. I want to recognize his family and friends. I know so many of you are here, particularly his mom, Camila, his brother, Rob, Hassan, Dodd, Mia, Youssef, Tony, and so many others. I just want to thank you so much for loving him as much as you did. You were his, you know, he couldn't have done everything he did in this world without all of the people that loved and took care of him and drove him and took him to whatever he needed and just really renewed his spirit, because he gave his spirit all of the time. So we're going to start off today's event with seeing a documentary that featured Rodney in it. It was created by Gladys Ben Simon, and she is here with us tonight. Today. She is the creator of A Way Out. And she created this piece after having done volunteer work here in Newark, working with children. And then she read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. And something clicked in her, and she said it's about opportunity. And she said, I want to create something that shows that when people are given opportunity, anything is possible. So thank you, Gladys, for being a part of today's presentation, and we're excited to see your film. And before we do that, what's a film without snacks, right? So there is a table of snacks, so please, before it starts, go get some snacks, open up your chips, and then we'll get started.
I had a close-knit group of male friends growing up, and I watched them end up in incarceration. I've survived it. I've seen some of my peers not survive it.
For me, it was always a struggle. Where do I fit in?
I was 17 years old, and I was at the lowest point in my life.
My mother was incarcerated for a major portion of my life.
My mom raised us. We know what it is to be on welfare.
We realized, wow, we don't look like them. Like, wow, and we're not, how come our uniforms are old and ripped, and how come we don't have fences in our parks?
The problems that Newark faces today are the same type of problems that I faced in 1970.
The city was basically like in an uproar.
The riot really started in earnest that evening and led to several days of mass destruction.
The conditions, the quality of life, you had a society in which the people at the lower end of the economic scale were not benefiting from the economy at all.
Poverty is more than just a lack of money.
You have people who want to work,
but the jobs aren't there. They maybe don't have the skills and the education that they need.
The real issue is jobs, right? That people need access to jobs so that they can support themselves.
I'm not saying that there's no racism, but I'm saying that the dynamic that reproduces racial inequality is more about favoritism of whites toward other whites than whites toward non-whites.
I think what African Americans need to do is they need to learn how to be entrepreneurs and start their own businesses.
I was supported heavily by people saying that I was special, I was going to be somebody, I was at the table from the beginning.
Here I am at an art gallery in Soho, in New York City, 19 years old, Puerto Rican kid from Newark, 10 years ago on a government cheese line.
I'm a person that people said would be nobody, I would never amount to anything. But because I was given the opportunity, I didn't realize the things that I had inside of me.
How are you, Kenneth? And it really shows, it's so exemplary of all the things that Rodney believed in so much, particularly justice and equality for everyone, particularly children. So we have one other performance. We have a special guest who's gonna perform some poetry, but we've been sitting for a minute, right? So I'm gonna say, you can get up for a sec, throw out your garbage. Those of you that just came in, you can find a seat. And then I'm going to call up our special guest. So it's just gonna take, just gonna give it like 30 seconds of moving around and finding your way.
See ya.
All right, and in the interest of time, I'm going to ask us to start making our way back to our seats as I introduce our next guest, who is a lover. She loves people, loves what she does. She is a warrior. She goes out and makes a difference all the time, and she is an artist. And she is really representative of a Rodney Gilbert production because she started off as one of his students years and years ago, and that's when I had a chance to meet her when she was just 11 or 12 and a part of Rodney's performance troupe Soul. And I've had an opportunity over the years to see her grow up and know how much Rodney has played such a big role in her life and what she does now. She's an activist. She is an artist in residence. She is a poet and a spoken word artist and advocates the importance of everyone using their voice. She is the host of People's Open Mic, Newark's longest running open mic series, and it is held at a Faro Gallery the last Wednesday of every month. So please, she wants everyone to come out at some time and be a part of that, and if you're an artist, to join in. As an activist, she's developed various programs, including one called Hug the Block, that's right. Hug the Block, where she brings artists to all four corners of a block and then at the end gathers everyone who was in attendance to literally handhold around the entire block and hug the block. which I think is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, and people come up to her and say, "When are you coming to hug my block?" Yes, and I would just like to give a big warm welcome to Mia X.
Thank you, Alicia. Wow, hi guys. Oh my gosh, family, that was wonderful to see. And thank you guys for having me. I just want to say before I read my piece that, hello, my heart always gets to fluttering. It's because I feel like it's very important. You know, Rodney is, I can't speak of him as was because he still is everything that he always will be. And he just means so much to me as a person, as an artist, as a mom, as a human being. Because I met him when I was 12 years old. To be a Newark student, 12 years old, I think I'm fly, I think I'm this, I think I'm that. And Rodney just cut all that out, but at the same time showed me that exactly. You need that. I feel like I'm so glad that he collided with me, that we had collision, because he made me a better person, and he was and is my model. You know, I feel like I'm a poetry rock star, but that's because he gave me words of Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou and all of these other people that still are in my brain right now. So just being a young person with something to say, but not really, like not knowing exactly what to say, to be in his presence, it just informed my voice. And so I'm very thankful for him, and I love him so much. So I hope that this little piece of poetry will inspire you because I know he inspires me. Okay, I call it Star. Who fights for us? Who sees us, hears us, and loves us just the same? Who laughs in the snow with us and dances in the rain? The rain of our feelings. The rain of our urban life to which we are the stars. Who experiences life with us and shows us who we are? Whose being is education? What's light to a Newark girl in a tunnel of a situation? How poems fix broken homes. How color causes growth to be born. How freedom faces faith forlorn and Newark skylines get torn and crumpled like pages. We write to face what's right while running away. We stay and find healing in play as the stages we rock take us. We make us new and do the beautiful art things we've always wanted to do, because in Newark we need dreamers, not people blindly telling us to dream. As a youth, I needed a champion who could hear me when I would scream. Silently, Rodney, hot heat and light, star blazing a trail, a tribute to the heart and spirit, a will, a willingness to learn, a propensity to keep it real. As if you knew all we needed was to let light love us out of our brokenness. Like, let passion push us toward a better life, a better way to be, because it ain't nothing out there in them streets you see, because every bum on the street has talent, but what are you going to do with yours? To be impacted. Ask the question, experience the sound coming true like a trailblazer traveling by truth, where love is introduced as love to love, a commitment to empower our youth. Me, us, we, this life be an expression, a stage touching, teaching our people to deal with the rage we wear like a coat. His was a beautiful fur. We a stand for Brick City streets unraveling in our hands at our feet. You showed us where the world sat and more, what we could do to speak and spark a fire within that sits back, a fire within, a reaching fire, a fire rising higher and higher, writing ourselves a tale of survival. More more than we could ever have imagined. You are a star. Human contribution, masterpiece on the concrete steps of possibility where we get to realize ourselves as ideas, poems, quotes, songs, monologues, plays, stories, film, drama, murals, like Dr. King quote, scribbled all over my hands, my arms, a notebook for how much home hurt, and you helped me stay alive. You, prism for the projects, promise, a moment to reflect. Spirit, like when your mural breathes its first breath, so you can be who you're meant to be and not who they want you to be. We, your children, students, your children, your students are your lived, loved experience through our eyes like a colored museum's rain stick. You sat us on many stoops where we discover what life was like for our mothers, blues babies, jazz vortex rainbow, a caterpillar's hope over drums, dreams. We leaned on you through song, your strength a mantra to go on, understanding, walking tall. Father, teacher, I keep it real. I expose you to your greatness. I fight for how you feel. Father, teacher, friend, star. Creative warrior, we write, we read, we dance, we bend, we play, we acknowledge, we live, we art, we love, and burn brighter and brighter because you taught us to. I don't even think I breathed. I held my breath that whole time. But I love Rodney, I love words, and just like watching the video and just remembering that how important words were before I found them. It's just very important that people like him exist, to put a book in my hand, to put a script in my hand, because we all know that Newark has a lot of other places that we could be besides somewhere practicing, and him saying, go back, do it again. And we used to get so mad, but he was helping us to be professional. And he was showing us a whole new life. I mean, I would not be who I am with this colorful thing on my head. I promise I would not be reading and feeling alive when I share my words if it wasn't for him. So I love you, Rodney, forever and ever and ever and ever. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Mia X, everybody. Mia X. What an incredible voice. What an incredible piece of work. And she said it all. She said it all. And we're going to bring this portion to a close. But I want to again acknowledge Rodney's family, his mother, Camila. I'm going to ask you guys to stand if you can, just so people can see you. Brother Rob, Dodd, Mia, Hassan, Tony Baskerville, Youssef, and I know I'm missing people because Rodney's family was big and deep. So if you felt that you were part of him, connected to him, if you supported him, if you loved him, stand up too. Stand up too. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because you helped make him who he was and is, who he is, and what he's done. And we hope to continue this celebration of Rodney. It's going on and on. I understand that tonight there's a gallery naming at a Faro gallery after Rodney. I believe it starts at 7 p.m., so join there. We're also, a number of artists are coming together to work on a large art celebration, hopefully this summer. We're making some connections and trying to work that out, so please stay tuned for that. And thank you to the Newark Public Library for hosting this wonderful event. And we just gotta also, yes, thank you, Newark Public Library. And last but not least, we gotta give it up for Miss Celeste Bateman, who put this event on, the producer, the extraordinary Miss Celeste Bateman. And please stay. We're going to wrap this portion up, but there is going to be a Black Lives Matter panel discussion following this, and you are free to stay. But again, thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon, very rainy afternoon at the Newark Public Library. I'm Jeffrey Trzak, the still, I hope, relatively new director of the Newark Public Library. We moved here just about a year ago, and very pleased to be living in Newark and working in Newark as well. For those of you who I haven't met, I want to give you just a 10-second overview of my background. I'm very pleased to be here as part of this afternoon's session. I was formerly the Dean of Libraries at Washington University in St. Louis. And my husband Michael and I lived in one of the neighborhoods affected after one of the shootings. Not the shooting of Michael Brown, but there was a second one in our neighborhood shortly after that. And I'm very pleased to say that I'm also the founder of a project called Documenting Ferguson, which you can still find online. During the protests that occurred after he was murdered, we created a team of experts, librarians and archivists who we had on the ground during those protests, capturing images, audio, video, artwork, music, anything you can imagine, including more than 11 million tweets related to Ferguson and also Black Lives Matter. So it's something that is a topic that's very important to me and also very near and dear to my heart, both professionally and also personally as well. So I'm pleased to be part of this. I also want to acknowledge, I think we have a board member, Dr. Anas Amat. She's still, yeah, okay, there we go. I think anytime I introduce Anas, I think she's in the food line. She's getting healthy food. She's got grapes and cheese. I want to thank Alicia Souter, who hosted our tribute to Newark Arts Administrator, actor, activist Rodney Gilbert, who left us much too soon on November 8th, 2017. Rodney was a cultural icon in our community and was particularly fond of working with young people, nurturing the next crop of visual and performing artists and audience members. I didn't know him very well, but I was very fortunate to have worked with him at least a little, and I join all of you in missing him sorely. I also want to thank filmmaker Gladys Ben-Simon for bringing us the film A Way Out, of which Rodney was a major part. And I want to thank as well Kenneth Wakefield, who I hope is still here, was in the film as well. And I want to thank you I want to say thank you to our friend, the talented poet and performer Mia X, who was here a moment ago, for her very special poem for Rodney. And finally, I also want to say thank you to the family members for allowing us in this small way to pay tribute to him, pay tribute to Rodney, who meant so much to so many. So thank you for that. I want to invite you all back as well on Friday, February 23rd for our after-work dance party featuring back in the day house and R&B music of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I know that some of you attended some of our dance party events over the past summer in our courtyard, where we saw as many as 400 people on Friday nights, dancing in the library. So come out for that as well. I'm sure it'll be a fun time. It's going to be hosted by the renowned Newarker DJ Mr. Slim. So take your dancing shoes to work and stop by the Newark Public Library after work for a good time. If you have not already done so, I invite you to peruse our Black History Celebration exhibit, Brick and Martyr, by the photojournalist Akintola Hanif, on view just outside of this room in the second floor gallery. It'll be up until April 30th of this year. We have several exciting events coming up, and we have flyers that are available in the back of the room. I want to take this time now to thank our sponsor for these outstanding events, PNC Foundation. Finally, I also want to invite you to pick up a brochure about the James Brown African American Room, which is currently on the first floor of the library, and very soon you'll be hearing about our exciting plans for this important resource center. We'll be increasing the size, increasing staffing, increasing collections, and renovating some space for that resource center as well. For those of you who are coming in, if you can't find a seat in here, we also have seats available on the first floor in the James Brown room, and we will be streaming this event to that location too. With that, I'm pleased to welcome to the podium Lori Scott-Pickens, who will take over from here as moderator of our panel. Today's event represents the third annual Black Lives Matter panel discussion at the Newark Public Library. So without further ado, please welcome Lori Scott-Pickens, Director of Community Outreach and Adjunct Professor at the School for Criminal Justice at Rutgers University-Newark.
Good afternoon. It's good to be home. Thank you, Celeste and Jeffrey, for having me today. I'm humbled and honored to be the moderator for today's panel on the Black Lives Movement effort. I had the pleasure earlier to enjoy the film documentary on Rodney Gilbert. I know Mr. Wakefield personally. We work in Rutgers together. And so it was very pleasurable to participate and to see that film and to even look back on what it means to be a Newarker. Today, I want to guide you as best I can through the changes that have occurred since the Black Lives Movement began. There is some change, but so many things remain the same. As of today, in 2018, there have been 134 killings of civilians by police in this country. And we are not at the end of February at this time. Implicit bias and racial profiling seems to be the order of the day. And we have much to talk about. The discussion and the conversation starters that have began need to continue. In the Obama administration, the 21st Century Task Force on Policing talked about the problems between police and the community, but the dialogue needs to continue. As findings of that report, there were grave concerns about the fact that the police have become warriors, as evidenced by the militarization of police departments around this country. And when there has to be a show of force, it looks like the Army is coming into town rather than people who are trying to work together to resume calm. By way of history, for those of you who don't know, the founding members of the Black Lives Movement are Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal, who originated the hashtag Black Lives Matter, was a call to action in 2013 after the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman, who today continues to plague neighborhoods with brandishing guns and being a perpetrator of domestic violence. So what does the Black Lives Matter do? The Black Lives Matter does the following. It mobilizes campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards Black people, regularly holds protests speaking out against the killings of Black people by police. They address broader issues such as racial profiling, police brutality, and racial inequality in the American criminal justice system. Since the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've had elected officials like Rudy Giuliani and others who have politicized the Black Lives Matter movement to say all lives matter. That wasn't the intent of the founders. We're talking specifically about Black Lives Matter. We're not saying all lives don't matter, but we're talking about Black Lives Matter. And they have exploited for political gain and for even criticism the Black Lives Matter movement. We want to change that dialogue, at least today in this room, to talk about where we are today in the movement. Our esteemed panelists are Dr. Robert Johnson, Dean of the School of Medicine at Rutgers Medical School, Fatimah Loren Muhammad, Director of Trauma Advocacy Initiative, Demelza Baer, Senior Counsel and Director of Economic Mobility for the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and Alfred Bundy, co-founder of the American Black Male Leadership Institute. Please read their bios at your convenience. To get us started, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to come forward. I am your, excuse the pun, traffic cop today, and I am going to shepherd them along. I want to give them an opportunity to tell you who they are, what they stand for, their work around the Black Lives Matter movement campaign has been all about, and then I'm going to go through a series of questions that I have, and time permitting, we'll be able to take some questions from the audience. First, I'd like to bring to you Alfred Bundy, who I've known for many years, and we are former college mates from Montclair State University. Alfred Bundy.
Thank you, Lori. Let me just say that technology kind of rules, the world. I mean, we can't live with it, we can't live without it. I like to say Google has its hands in everything and it's changing everything. But sometimes this technology can get a little bit embarrassing. I don't know how many times you've been trying to say, heck, that's not my password. Or you can't get access because you can't remember your PIN, How about any times you sent that hot romantic love message to someone and when you hit the button it went to your grandmother? Or how about that time when you sitting there saying, now listen, I'm going to send this heartfelt message to somebody I care, I love you, I'm thinking about you all day, hit the button, they send you a message back saying, who's this? Even my bill collectors, they've been getting in the act lately. They sent me a text talking about I owed them 3 months back payment. I sent them a message back, who's this? But as much as we need high tech, we certainly still need high touch. We can't stop lifting, touching, and reaching each other on this journey. And my name is really Al Bundy. And trust me, I'm peacock proud and honey-do happy to just be here with you for just a few minutes. My topic today is really talk about black males and some of the concerns that we have. I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to certainly give you a few of my observations. Certainly we've had extraordinary black men and males doing great things, loving their kids, taking care of their neighborhood, loving their wives, doing all the right things. We've even had some of the best, brightest superstars in sports and entertainment that you ever want to know, making big, big money. And the number one draw in the box office today is a black male. We know him as Dwayne Johnson. We affectionately call him The Rock. And not that long ago, we even put a black man in the White House. Now, ignore the ignorance of President number 45. Because I can assure you that number 44 was one of the most phenomenal, greatest presidents America has ever known. But even with all our achievements, we still have a lot of black males in trouble. According to Michelle Alexander in her book, The New Jim Crow, we have more black men on parole, on probation, and in prison than we had people in slavery in 1850. And when you look at the revisionist philosophy being espoused by people like Steve Bannon and being implemented by this president named Trump, when you look around and think about all the technology, data mine programming that they're doing to all of us and the bling bling that's everywhere, really what's going on with black males is hardly on anybody's agenda. Not really. Let me give you a few statistics very quickly. Less than 45% of all young black males graduate from high school. Let me say that again. Less than 45% of all young black males graduate from high school. 32% of all those who are suspended in high school are black males, twice of their white male counterpart. Overall, 67% of all black men earn less than white men. A young black male in America is likely to die of gunfire than any soldier in Vietnam. Close to 1.5 million black men have lost their voting rights due to felony convictions. Blacks account for only 12% of our population in the United States, but over 45% of them make up our prison population. And many of the institutions that should be there to help and lift black men, so often black men are in crisis with. That includes the courts, that includes our prison system, that includes housing, and to tell you the truth, black men are in danger from other black men. Now, three of the most pressing factors to keep black men down is poverty, lack of parental support, and certainly having a good education. What I want to just share with you is just a few observations, just a few things that are going on right now, and I'll be done. Give you some of the glimpse, give you the barrier, some of the things that are happening that still keep black men from being all that they can. We have this thing called ban the box. As far as I'm concerned, it's a flawed piece of legislation. I've told many legislators that. I mean, they've got companies hiring a lot of our black men. They work right up to the 91st day. On the 91st day, they tell them, you know what, you got a record. Can't give you no benefits, can't give you no health care, you terminate, you out. We got to look at that legislation again. It needs to be revised. We have something in the welfare system called able-bodied adults without dependents, better known as ABOBs. In the welfare system, 95% of ABOBs, able-bodied adults without dependents, are black males. Now, most of them are eligible for some type of general assistance or welfare. The problem is that they have to sit in a job search program for 90 days. And in that first, if they stop any of those days, they go back to day one. Now, the same young woman, if she comes in with a baby, she walks out the door with food stamps. And I'm not opposed to that. It only makes sense. She should have that. But the problem that I want you to see is that you've immediately made that young black male dependent on that young mother to eat, to get some food. Don't you think there's some resentment being built there? In many of our communities, we're dealing with this struggle to try to get Amazon here. And we know that Amazon is the big catfish. We like to see that coming, but Amazon got a policy that you may not know about. If you work there 1 year, you have to leave. Now you can either take a $1,000 and go out the door, or you could take $3,000 and use it to go to education. Now, at the same time, Amazon is saving millions of dollars. The problem is that you dump that black male right back into the unemployment ranks again, okay? We're engaging in this lively discussion here in New Jersey about legalizing marijuana. And don't get me wrong, I think there's something hypocritical about the whole discussion about drugs, especially when we look at opioid addiction. And we can thank Governor Christie, who showed us that we need to love and support them. And those same people use heroin to self-medicate after they stop using the opioid drugs. Now, we got black males who are suffering a long prison sentence for just a few ounces of marijuana. So we got a lot of conflict, but you know, money rules, and money's more important than people. And so as much as we may not like it, you better pay close attention that this may become a reality in this state very soon. But I'm concerned about what we're going to do about those who are trying to get a drug test to get a job. Now myself, I'm a cable television host for this state. I got to be drug tested once a year just to keep my job. Now once that legislation becomes law, now, you know, just think about it now. I don't even want to get too deep about that. One last thing I want to talk about is this test called the TABE test. Some of y'all may know about the TABE test. You have to take the TABE test so that you can get into a training program to get a job. Recently, privatization took over the TABE test. It's now run by Princeton Educational Testing Service. It's controlled by McGraw-Hill Publishing Company. And that same TABE test that used to take 90 minutes, as of July 1st, will take 4.5 hours. Now I got a pretty good education. I got a master's degree and a candidate for a PhD. But at the same time, let me explain something to you. I can't even imagine sitting for a going for a test for 4 to 5 hours. Can't even think about it, okay? These are some of the burdens, some of the barriers that keep our young men from working. And lastly, I want to mention our elected officials. I don't care what nobody says. Our elected officials got to become more accountable. We got to get real serious about these people who represent us. You know, I haven't heard one of them have a hearing on institutionalized racism yet. They need to have a hearing on institutionalized racism. You can tell them I said so. You know, they are supporting everything else but us, okay? And I want you to really understand our state and federal legislators play a role in this madness and problems that we have in our community. And no more concerned about them getting reelected. We need to make sure that they are held more accountable. See, our black males are going to have to survive one way or the other. Now, they can survive pimping their grandmother, living on her couch. You know, they can pimp their girlfriends, they can be in the streets, they can go back and forth in and out of prison for some room and board, but somehow or another, they got to survive. So we have to create strategies and figure out plans and programs that will give them a pathway to success. And we have to be very serious about that. Now, finally, I want to say that, and some of you are not going to agree with me, but understand that a lot of our black men, especially our young boys, they love their mother. You can't say nothing bad about their mother. Believe me, they'd be ready to fight. But as much as they love their mother, they don't respect their mother. You know, let me tell you something to you. They hear them talking bad about their father. They hear them talking bad about other black men, and that stereotype is already being reinforced every day in the music, on television, and on the music that they listen to, and the films that they see. So we got to think about what we're saying sometimes, because that stuff is being internalized with them, and then this vicious cycle continues. We need to close the gap between men and women, not widen it. So I want you to think about that. Confucius says the person who says I can and the person who says I can't are probably both right. We got to help our young men to believe that they can. We got to help our young men believe that they will, that they can make it. You know, the internet can be used for all types of purposes. It can be used for socializing and getting a date, for shopping. But we need to help our young people understand, especially our black men, that they can use the internet to get a job. They can use the internet to make their dreams come true. We need to help them download the importance of knowing how to do a training job application and uploading that employment application. We need to help them download business and marketing plans so that they can begin to upload their websites of their new companies. We need to download voter registrations, all of us, so we can get a better leader in the White House. And if they are afraid, then they need to download the stories of the brothers and sisters who were in the civil rights movement and get the inspirational stories that help give them the courage and the patience and the determination to change this nation. You know, this is in our hands. Let me tell you something, we can't rely on a whole lot of other people. We need to help them download faith and commitment, knowing that they can succeed, and that they can be rich and they can be prosperous. And there's nothing wrong with being rich. Let's make that very clear. But more importantly, what type of personal legacy will they leave? You know, when it's all said and done, what will others say about you, what we did to help lift our brothers? In a normal life, you get about 30,000 days on earth. That's about all you get. Now, their lives are not running out. I mean, their time is not running out, but their life is. And we got to make sure that we are very serious about this discussion and this talk. So as I go to sit down, I just hope that we will work with a new spirit of commitment, that we will dedicate ourselves to a spirit of fellowship and togetherness, that we will renew our commitment to our families and to our communities, especially to our young black men, giving them the knowledge to make them know that they too can make a difference. Now, the problems that facing black men is multi-level, multifaceted. There's so many different problems. I don't have time to get into all of them. All of y'all have your own concerns and issues about it, but I just wanted to share just a little light. Last, I want to leave you with this quote by C.S. Lewis, who said, "You're never too old or too young to set another goal or to dream a new dream." Maybe James Dean put it best. Our young men need to dream as if they will live forever and live as though they will die today. Jesse Jackson said, "Let's keep hope alive." Dr. King said, "I have a dream." Let me say something to all of you. We got to keep pushing and praying and pulling so that all our dreams can become a reality. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Demelza Baer, and I'm a senior counsel and director of the Economic Mobility Initiative at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. If you're not familiar with the Institute, we are a legal advocacy organization that works to identify load-bearing walls of structural inequality that, if toppled, would open up doors of opportunity for urban residents to realize and achieve their full potential. Our hope is that Newark and every other community in New Jersey will one day be fully realized, just, vibrant, healthy communities. And as part of our work, we work across 3 pillars. One is economic mobility, where I'm going to be focusing my remarks. The second is criminal justice reform. And the third is civic engagement. But before I go on, given that we are here honoring Rodney Gilbert, I wanted to share a brief memory. Rodney worked with us at the Institute on our juvenile justice decarceration campaign, 150 Years is Enough. And the point of this campaign was to close Jamesburg and Hayes. Jamesburg is our largest boys' prison in the state, and Hayes is our largest girls' facility. And I'm sure you all know that Governor Chris Christie announced in December that the campaign was successful and that we would be closing these prisons. Rodney worked with us, yes, please, that deserves applause. Rodney worked with us on a mural for youth who had been involved in the justice system to tell their story about how they got involved in the system, how it impacted them and their family. And through the mural and through the work that Rodney did, he helped heal and bring us all together. And that mural and the stories that the youth told through that mural and through arts and through every part of the campaign was really what pushed it over the edge and made it an issue that wasn't about partisanship or politics, but just an issue of justice. So I just want to honor Rodney's memory and just say that what I hope, just to emphasize what Al said, what I hope we all take away from today is that we are in the middle of the next civil rights movement. The Black Lives Matter movement kicked off this point in time, and what we all should aspire to do is to touch as many people as Rodney did during his life, through however we can give back. And just to put it in context of where we are right now, it's been 50 years since Dr. King worked with members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to organize a Poor People's Campaign. At that time, just to put the numbers in perspective, black people had an unemployment rate that was twice that of white people. They only earned 55% as much in income, and the poverty rate was double. Do you know what the numbers are today? They're the same. You're right. Right now, we still have a poverty rate that is twice that of white people. We still have an unemployment rate that is twice that of white people. And the income disparity went from earning 55% to 61%. And right now, for every $100 in wealth that a white family has, a black family has $5.04. So we have a long ways to go. It has been a long time, but much has not changed. A couple of years ago, when President Obama was speaking at the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington in DC, he said that economic equality was the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. And it is. Right now, the two biggest issues facing us are criminal justice reform and economic equality. When we get to a point of economic equality, by the way, you would see wealth distributed equally. You would see every child, no matter what family they were born into, would have the same opportunities. But right now, people of color do not experience economic mobility the way that white people do. If you look at a child born into poverty who's a child of color, half of those children, by the time they reach the age of 40, will still be in poverty. The number for white children is only 25%, which is what you'd expect it to be. And just to put those numbers in perspective nationally, they're awful across the board, but we in New Jersey have particular challenges. We rank number 41 on disparities in poverty by race. That means that 40 other states are better than us in having equal distribution of economic opportunity. Here in Newark, unfortunately, we're an exemplar of these disparities. Newark is a majority people of color city. 3/4 the people who live in Newark are people of color. But unfortunately, they do not have access to the economic opportunities that we have thriving right here in downtown Newark. We're surrounded by some of the largest Fortune 500 companies in the country, some of the best universities in the country, some of the best healthcare systems, some of the best arts and cultural institutions, just within walking distance. Right now we have skyscrapers being built, hotels coming to the downtown, people moving here, new businesses opening every other month. But there's a huge gap in access to opportunity. Right now, 18% of the people who work in the city of Newark are Newark residents. And for Newark residents who do work here, they tend to be concentrated in lower paying jobs. Right now, the jobs in the city of Newark that pay less than $15,000 a year, 26% of them are held by Newark residents. For the jobs that pay between $15,000 and $40,000 a year, 28% of them are held by Newark residents. For those jobs, the majority of which we have in the city of Newark that pay more than $40,000 a year, only 10% of Newark residents hold those jobs. And you might be asking yourself, why are those disparities existing? And people came with a lot of ideas to us, but we looked at it in our research. And people said, well, maybe it's because local residents don't want those jobs. Wrong. Local residents have the same labor participation rate as the rest of the country. In fact, people of color have a higher labor participation rate here in Newark. Another explanation was, well, maybe some people aren't just job ready. Again, wrong. Tens of thousands of Newark residents travel long distances, sometimes a commute of an hour or more, to different parts of New Jersey and New York to find work. So they're clearly employable because they're already working. Another reason we heard was that there's huge educational disparities, and that accounts for these employment disparities. Again, wrong. Employed Newark residents and people who work in downtown Newark and all throughout the city have pretty similar educational attainment rates, with the exception of one group, people with college degrees. People who work in the city of Newark, about 31% of them have college degrees, and employed Newark residents, about 19% of them have college degrees. So there is a difference, but not a huge enough difference to account for these disparities. So I don't want to leave you on a sad note, though, because right now we have a tremendous opportunity for hope here. Because we're at a period of economic growth, and we know we know the solutions that we have to these problems. One is that under Mayor Baraka and the city of Newark and our major businesses through the Newark Alliance, Prudential Financial, Robert Wood Johnson, Rutgers University, we have an initiative called Newark 2020, which is seeking to bridge the gap between the unemployment rate in the city of Newark and the state of New Jersey by 2020 by connecting 2020 unemployed local residents to jobs that pay a living wage, not just a wage, a living wage, by December 2020. So we have that initiative, and there's other solutions like raising the minimum wage that would help bridge both divisions by race and gender in the state and help us get closer to the economic opportunity that everyone deserves. And in the state of New Jersey, unfortunately, women of color, both black women and Latina women, have the largest pay gap disparity in the entire nation. So this is something we have to think about both as a racial equity and a gender equity issue. So look forward to talking about these issues even more. But again, I want to emphasize, going back to the point of we are in this movement, and what we all have to ask ourselves is what we can do to advance it, what part we can play. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about trauma. What is trauma? Homicide, rape, domestic violence, slavery, homelessness, human trafficking, police shootings. These are the experiences that are disproportionately concentrated in our communities. Many of us are the walking wounded. If we had time, I would sit and ask each and every one of you stories about what you've seen or what you've experienced. But because we don't have time, I want to say a collective acknowledgement that there are people in this room who have seen and experienced things that they may have never shared. I appreciate you. I acknowledge you for your courage and your survival. My name is Fatimah Loren Muhammad. I'm the Deputy Director at Equal Justice USA. We are a national criminal justice reform organization that works at the intersection of criminal justice and public health. For the last few years, thank you. Thank you. For the last several years, I have thought very deeply about how we address the hurt, the pain, the anger that festers in our community. There is an insufficient amount of resource that goes to our healing. And what we are working on right now is a healing movement. EJUSA began our work in New Jersey 10 years ago, organizing homicide victims. So these are men and women who lost their sons to gun violence, and asked them, what is it that you need? And they said overwhelmingly, there are millions and millions and millions of dollars that are invested in locking our kids up, disciplining them, killing them, an insufficient amount of resources to support our healing, understanding our pain, and transforming it. I'm here to say to you that that is intentional. This system has been designed to do exactly what it was supposed to. By ignoring our pain, it prevents us from fully fighting for and getting all the resources that we deserve in our community. And it is absolutely wrong. So, I am here to make a bold request of all of you to join a healing movement, a movement that centers our pain for the purpose of transforming it. I don't know about you, but I get tired of hearing these stories, and I get tired of hearing these stats that put Black people at the bottom, because we know our truth, that we are an incredible community of resilience, hope, celebration, joy, right? And we get to claim our resilience. And the way we do that is by sharing our stories of what we've done to transform our pain. What we've done in Newark is design a program that brings community residents and police officers together to actually talk about this healing movement, talk about what it means to address trauma. And in doing so, we have really created something powerful. Some of you in this room, I recognize your faces, have participated in our trauma training. And instead of telling you details about it, what I'd like to do is actually share with you a clip of the actual program. And then on the other side, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about it. I believe it's keyed up. Great.
It took us 50 years to get federal oversight over corrupt policing in this town. And where the accountability piece is so high and so difficult for us to get over our trust issues, because where we need accountability the most is where we get it the less. And that's when they kill us. When they kill us, there is no accountability.
Sometimes I feel like people in the community forget that I'm coming to the scene to help. But as soon as one police officer does something bad, every good thing that I've ever done has been swept under the rug, and I'm always seen as a negative light, just because I'm a police officer.
I don't know how sustainable it is for us to keep marching down the road that we're marching on.
In Newark, New Jersey, a critical experiment is taking place, putting police officers in the same room with citizens to hear each other out.
Part of my relationship with law enforcement, the ones that weren't my coaches, is I don't answer any questions at all. So the war on drugs has been a barrier to me being a young single parent and me ushering my son into, this trusting goodwill relationship with law and community.
The training is part of a grant given to Equal Justice USA to teach police officers and civilians about how trauma impacts their day-to-day life.
Right. Substance abuse, right? Risky behavior, depression, suicidal thoughts. Might the same behavior we're identifying as lazy, as being bad parents, what's wrong with you, be linked trauma.
Over the course of 1 month, the group meets, watches videos, works in teams, and has real talk about what they see on the job and in the streets.
Part of the reason I'll never be able to see you as the individual beyond you being the police officer that's present is because you're not my neighbor. You know, I'm not saying you specifically, but because you're not my neighbor. So I wonder about your depth of your commitment and whether or not you can address the trauma because you don't see the trauma's impact as a community member.
So it becomes dangerous for my kids and I. If I'm arresting these criminals out here, they know me, they start knowing my kids. So I'm not gonna put my kids in danger just because you want me to feel what you feel. I see it every day what you guys go through. I work in Newark and I lived here.
I'm hearing a barrier to trust in the community is not having proximity, having closeness.
Right.
So it's not to say you shouldn't have done what you've done, but
right, to do my job right, my kids, my family they have to be
cared for. You're reacting to the trauma that's happening in communities that, again, it's not just acute trauma and chronic trauma, but it's historical trauma.
Last year, the Justice Department ordered Newark police to reform, citing evidence of unconstitutional practices from excessive force to theft by officers. Zaid Muhammad is a longtime activist who says only one change will help some community members trust again.
We're constantly being killed innocently, in spectacle fashion nowadays even. You know, and there's no accountability. How can you expect a community to be loyal and to be trusting?
Many of the officers at the training are sympathetic to community frustrations.
I think that the training not only can help me, but I think that it should be, everyone should be trained like this because sometimes we forget, you know, we disassociate ourselves and you can't disassociate yourself from the community because if you do, you can't work with the community.
I didn't feel attacked at all. It's like everybody has their own opinion. Just like I have my own opinion, the citizens have their own opinion. At least I can hear the feedback as far as what the citizens need, what they dislike as far as the officers.
During the training, officers opened up about on-the-job trauma, describing traveling from violent crime scene to crime scene and having a hard time forgetting what they saw.
And you have to look in the mirror every day. Did I do the right thing today? Did I do the right thing today? Am I gonna do the right thing today? Am I all right to do the right thing today? Right. You have to self-check.
Why can't you, through your union or whatever, demand that these kind of resources, whatever kind of resources you all need, mental health days, retreats, whatever, because we empathize and understand that you have the most dangerous job, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world.
So we're back for the third week of training, and what you see right now is folks are presenting how they would respond, keeping trauma in mind whenever they encounter violence. So police and community members are coming together to make sure that they present solutions. The training has broken some walls, but to build bridges, the work is just getting started.
I feel really happy that I took this training with all of you. You know, we're humans. So just because of this uniform, you know, we're still just like you.
All this other stuff about the double shifts and all that other kind of stuff and the traumas and not having any downtime has really, you know, helped me change the way I look at your job.
That's how we break the cycle, by teaching this. We go to the Newark Public Schools, we go to the high schools, the universities, all across the planet, and we teach this.
Was there anything that you heard from the officers who participated in this program that makes you think they're going to go about policing differently? Did you feel heard by them?
They're human beings in the end, and they were forced to confront their own human limitations in their professional environment, the lack of support that they absolutely need to protect their humanness in their professional environment, and what they have to confront that is bigger than them, and that is the historical legacy of racism in this country that particular institution has been the principal arm for. If they can learn that and incorporate that into their personal lives and their personal approaching, then they won't be the ones that'll be killing us.
Thank you. I just want to say a little bit more about this training. They are happening in the spring and the fall in Newark, so you all can sign up. It's small groups. That size you saw is about what you can expect. A handful of rank and file officers in every neighborhood and community members come together for 3 days, once a week, to talk about trauma. And we go deep. We don't just talk about trauma that happens in everyday life, we talk about slavery and its historical impact on our community. We talk about officer trauma and how it affects officers and their use of force in the community because they are going from violent incident to violent incident. We talk about special populations like boys and men of color and the way in which little boys, when they experience trauma, are not acknowledged and instead heavily disciplined. That puts them on paths towards incarceration. We talk about women and girls of color and the silence in our community talking about sexual violence and rape. We talk about the LGBT community and again, the issues of domestic violence in those communities. It's a very powerful training. But we don't just talk about the negative, we talk about what we can do, what can be done in everyday life to heal our own trauma and support each other. There are actual skills. We know the science has caught up. We know what to do to address trauma at an individual level and at a collective level. So we talk about that and we end with solutions. What's our vision for this city to address trauma and really promote this healing movement? So I'm excited to share more with you. I invite you to come and participate in these trainings, and I look forward to working with all of you on addressing trauma, our healing, and our resilience and our prosperity in Newark. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm the cleanup person. If you read my bio, you know that I'm the dean of the Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. What that means is that if you see those buildings up on the hill, I run all those buildings. In addition to that, I'm chairman of the board of University Hospital, and most of you have heard about University Hospital, and you know what we do. I've been doing all this for almost half a century. I first stepped foot in Newark, New Jersey in 1968. When I was a medical student, the school was in Jersey City, and we came to Newark after the medical school was thrown out of Jersey City, and I was one of the people who started the Student Family Health Care Clinic, and we provided health care to people in this city. And I've stayed here for all these years. As the dean of the medical school and the chairman of the board, what we do is we provide direct care to individuals one at a time. The other thing that we do is we train other persons to do the same thing. 175 physicians every year are trained in our medical school. 500 individuals are trained every year through our residency programs at University Hospital. Many of those individuals come from this city. The other thing that I do is I provide care. In 1976, I started the Division of Adolescent and Young Adult Medicine at New Jersey Medical School. I started a similar program in New York City, and 6 sessions a week, I provide direct care to teenagers and young adults in these 2 areas. Now, if you multiply all of that, and I just did it just a moment ago, I provide care to 90,000 people in 44 years. That's a whole lot of people. And most of those people have been black. And so my life has been one devoted to black lives, one at a time. Now, the other thing I do is I'm a scientist. I'm on a number of boards in Washington at the National Academy of Science and also at the CDC. And so we spend time thinking about what are the policies in this country that we need to improve things for people. Call it public health. And many of those lessons have come as a result of this process of thinking about what you learn by seeing individuals one at a time. And in my life, I've learned a number of things. Two of them have resulted in books, one called The Race Trap that talked about interracial communications. The other, Strengths for the Journey, that resulted in a book for African American parents about how to raise their children. So one of the very important things we learned is that there are two observations you can make in general that result in better outcomes for Black people. Now, just think about the frame from a physician's point of view. Our frame is one person at a time. Yesterday, a mother brought her 15-year-old son into our adolescent clinic. He was all decked out in red, and she's telling me that she's afraid he's joining a gang and she wants to know what we could do about it. So it's one person at a time. You're looking for one answer, not a social response, but an answer for that parent. And so in that respect, we've learned a whole lot about the two most important things that can occur in the lives of a Black child to improve the outcome. The single most important thing is the strength of the family. The stronger the family, the better the outcome. Now, I'm not talking about mother and father and aunts and uncles. I'm talking about the people who are involved consistently with the life of the child from the beginning all the way to the end. And we know that if there's consistent, strong family involvement, there's good outcomes. If there is weak and inconsistent family involvement, there's poor outcomes. And that family involvement means a couple of things. One, it means face time. You have to be with your kids. Your kids have to see you. Now, fortunately, you don't have to talk to them, and they don't need to listen to you. In fact, they probably won't listen to you, but they have to see you. They have to see you over and over again for 18 years. So you have to be around them. And one of the really interesting things we learn is the time when it's most important for them to be around you is while eating. Sitting down and having dinner every day is the best predictor of a good outcome. And again, remember what I said. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to inquire about what's been going on in their lives, any of those things. But they have to observe you. Now, it puts a big pressure on you because what they observe is what they're going to learn. Not what you say, but what you do. And even though you may think that your sons and daughters aren't looking at you and not listening to you, they are really, really listening to you and looking at everything you do. That brings us to the second most important thing about the family. You have to model good behavior. You can't expect your kids not to smoke if you smoke. You can't expect your kids not to drink or smoke marijuana if you drink and smoke marijuana, but I guess smoking marijuana will be okay, I suppose. You can't expect your kids to be better than you are, so you have to be a good person. The second most important thing we learned about good outcomes is, no surprise, education. If you go to school early childhood education, and if you graduate from high school, simple graduation from high school, you have better outcomes. Now, this is better outcomes for everything. You have less chance of getting STDs, less chance of early pregnancy, less chance of early homicide, less chance of unemployment, less chance of everything simply by going to school early and graduating from high school. So that's so powerful, as a matter of fact, that one of the committees I'm on at the CDC made a recommendation to the federal government that we shift money from health and justice to education, because education has such a profound impact. And one of the things we've learned is the most important part of education is, take a guess, is reading. The more you learn to read, the better the outcome. In fact, the most important course is English. And so gaining those skills has a great, and one of the most important places to be is a place like this, a library. And so one of the things we need to do is to invest more money in our communities in those libraries. Now, I've not, so you can always get an applause when you come to a library and say you should have more libraries, right? Now, I haven't said anything about better structure within the community. I haven't said anything about policing or the juvenile justice system. I've said things about individual actions that we can take. And one of the things we need to do, now that doesn't mean that all these other things don't need to be done, but we as individuals cannot expect our problems to be solved if they're not solved at home in the beginning. We have to take that responsibility. We have to take that responsibility with our own children, our own nieces and nephews, the kids that we see. And I hope I've taken that responsibility with 90,000 kids I've seen over 44 years. Those are the things, that's my frame on this. That, I think, is the one lesson I'd like for you to leave here thinking about, and thinking about how you can personally be involved. Remember the social issues, get involved in the social issues, but don't forget that the most important change is a change that occurs at your dinner table. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So now we're going to get to it and begin to start our discussion. I have a series of questions here that I'm going to ask the panelists to respond to. One of the most rewarding things about being a moderator is that you get to listen and learn. I've worked with each one of these individuals at some point or another on a community project, and I am continuously fascinated by the work that they do, and I'm very proud to know you all. Every time I listen to you, I learn something new. So I want to start where I was at a meeting earlier this week, and a community group at a local church decided to host a community forum, education forum on criminal justice reform in New Jersey. For those of you who don't know, New Jersey has just started, is coming up on the end of its first year of what's called criminal justice reform. Some of you may be more familiar with it in the term of bail reform, which means that when you go into custody, an assessment is done giving you a score of 1 being the lowest to 6 being the highest. And the closer you are to number 6, you're either gonna wait or you're gonna walk, right? And so you have the administrative office of the court has representatives who come out into the community along with law enforcement and people from our municipal courts talking about how that reform works. And there's a debate about it. There's some feelings, pro and con for it. But one of the things that struck me the most in the conversation that I heard earlier this week, someone stood up and said, you know, and the gentleman was in the room, but for whatever reason he had to leave. He's 40-something years old today. At 15, he committed a very serious offense. He has been working, he has been crime-free, and he got arrested. Because of his criminal history, that assessment I just explained to you, he ended up with a 5. So he couldn't be released because under the new reform, if you are considered at risk, you're not going out. You're not leaving. There's no more bail bondsmen in New Jersey are non-existent if they aren't already. So this reform is going to impact us all. My question to the panelists and whoever wants to take a jab at this, don't make me call on you. New Jersey has come up on the end of its first year in the wake of criminal justice reform. what I want to know, what are your thoughts on how the reform will affect policing? Because for those of you who also don't know, the police are not particularly impressed with this reform because they don't get to detain everybody that they pick up. So their probable cause for the reason that they feel somebody should be detained doesn't always work in their favor. So there's this tug of war between law enforcement and the courts about who stays and who goes. To my panelists here, how do you think that this reform is going to affect policing in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement? How do you think it impacts our communities? Who wants to go first? I see heads nodding.
I can start.
Okay, Fatimah?
Hi there. This might not be the direction you wanted, but, you know, I'm thinking about this 40-year-old who was once a young man, and you know, the first thing I wonder is, where were we before he committed his first serious crime, right? And frankly, the way that criminal justice reform has been framed focuses solely on consequences after the fact and not what happens before. And so I'm really concerned about that, because when you talk about bail reform and the impact it has on policing, police are on the front lines of this, right? So they see the immediate impact. So we can talk about bail reform in this broad context, and we know that there are gross racial disparities in terms of consequences, and that was part of the way in which bail reform was introduced. The problem is that we have not gotten to the root of the issue, so people are still behaving in criminal ways, and the cycle of harm in our communities continues. So because that is the case, police are going to see that immediately and be frustrated, because they've been taught that the response to seeing harm in communities is to arrest. And we've not replaced that knee-jerk reaction. We have no other way of addressing those issues, and that is an issue, I see. Because once you see things on the ground shift, in other words, investment in schools, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, and programs that are specifically, as Al Bundy has talked about, focused on our young people, when the net and the span of which we are addressing those issues really helps to transform those people who are most at risk, and police are not being deployed as the only defense against that, then the kinds of changes that we're making in criminal justice reform, they can be sustained. So, you know, people are concerned about, okay, well, we've closed these prisons, which is wonderful, right? Because there's gross racial disparities in who gets locked up. But then what are we going to do with these young people? What are we actually going to do? We need to come together and have an affirmative vision, because what's going to happen is, if we can't meaningfully come up with a response to that, we're going to be talking about fighting for prisons in 20 years, right? And that's not what we want. We want to have a vision that is so clear and so powerful that it actually, and it works, so that we're just decreasing the number of people who are causing harm in the first place, because they are getting the healing and the support they need at the outset. So I'm really talking about breaking the cycles from the beginning.
Just a couple of reactions. One is that in many communities, they have something called curbside adjustments. We don't have curbside adjustments in the inner cities. You know, police and that relationship with those who so often are being arrested, you know, there's, you know, and that needs to be looked at. That they need to be spending some time. I'm glad to hear the work that you're doing. I think it's so meaningful, and I hope out of that comes different ways on how we detain people or don't detain people. We start to criminalize our children too young, so that concerns me. The other thing I want to just react to is this thing about expungement. Expungement, and I heard the story, and I don't know, that may not really be an expungement issue, but expungement, as long as, you know, folks have these records, they can't go to work. There's so many things they can't do. And, you know, and we have to really talk about either how we've used DNA to help free some people from jail. Now we need to have some new systems to figure out how we get this expungement issue dealt with. It's a business, it's very expensive, and then at the same time, it's like a long-term, penalty even after they're out of jail. And so we got to really talk more about how we deal with expungement. I know Mayor Booker, when he was here, was trying to get into this issue. Your organization has been talking about it, but we still haven't resolved it. And it's still going on. And the main people being penalized are people of color.
Yeah, before you respond, Dr. Johnson, I think the fallacy and the problems associated with expungement have a lot to do with a false sense of hope that people believe that if they have a criminal history that it is somehow going to disappear. For those of you who are familiar with it, do know that there are certain felony offenses that are not expungible. And so some of our people are caught up with the fact that if they have a violent offense, robbery, murder, homicide, sexual assault, those particular offenses are not expungible, and that still keeps them behind the 8 ball. But I think what is critical, and President Barack Obama came to Rutgers and advocated for the ban the box. There's no reason for you to check off whether or not you have a criminal history if you're not going to the next phase of that interview process where you are being considered for employment. So that technically what has been proposed is that it ain't none of your business what my criminal history is unless you get to the point where you really want to hire me. But to exclude me because I check off that I have been arrested or convicted before I even get to point B is critically unfair and unjust. Dr. Johnson, you wanted to respond to my question?
Yes, Laurie. One of the important things about the example you raised is that the man who was 40 was 15 when he offended. And that raises the whole issue of how do we understand juvenile offending? Now, one of the more enlightening things that occurred in the Obama administration is that there were 2 efforts that were made to begin to understand how juvenile offending is different than adult offending, and to really question whether or not the assumptions we've made about trying juveniles as adults made any sense. I was at the National Academy of Science. I chaired a report for the administration on the juvenile justice system and an effort to reform the system and to correctly involve brain development. And a 15-year-old, even though he or she may offend seriously, is not an adult. The brain is not developed until 21 or 22 years of age. Therefore, it is inappropriate to assume that adult thought was used in the decisions that were made. Now, that finding not only affects the prison sentence and how we do whatever happens to the young person after they are arrested, but also informs how police should be involved as well. So that a juvenile offense at 15, regardless of what it is, should not have that same impact. And there's no evidence to suggest that it has a meaning for what an individual does as an adult. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, science doesn't make its way into politics. And politicians make decisions based on what's good for the voter box and not what's really based upon what makes sense from a scientific point of view.
Demelza, I didn't know if you wanted a response, but one of the responses that was given to the audience on that night was that, because part of the other side of the question was, how did we come up with this law, and have we had forums like this prior to the decision for it to be signed in? Mm-hmm. And the response from one of the panelists was that 68% of New Jerseyans voted in favor of criminal justice reform. So I think that's very interesting. The other part of it is, with expungement or not with expungement, we should also be educated and know that nothing that you do is gone. It is not because the discussion has been made or forms have been filled out and say it's expunged. Anybody who wants to find out what you've done in the past, that information is always available somewhere to somebody somehow. So we're really not safe. And keep in mind that the description I gave you, the gentleman is currently 40. People believe that when you are convicted of a juvenile offense, that when you become an adult, that it is no more, and that's not true at all. Demelza?
Thank you, Lori. So I think the issue of bail reform is a particularly important one because bail is really an issue that's at the cross-section of our economic justice issues and our criminal justice reform. Because so much of the bail system before, your ability to pay depended on your ability to get out of jail. So you could be arrested on something very minor, maybe marijuana possession, which might be legal in this state if things continue, and then end up spending months or even longer in jail, could lose your job, could be separated from your children, could suffer other negative consequences. So bail reform at the heart of it is really supposed to be addressing the fact that your economic circumstance should not determine how you're treated by the justice system. And because disproportionately people of color are arrested, even though rates of committing crimes are similar, people of color are disproportionately arrested, disproportionately convicted, suffer disproportionate contact with the justice system at every single point. This has tremendous racial justice implications. So it is a positive step that New Jersey is working towards bail reform. But one thing that has to be done really mindfully is that if you're creating risk assessment tools, you have to be very careful that they don't import the bias into the tool itself. So you do have to be mindful of what questions the tool asks and how it's interpreted. Al, you mentioned the curbside adjustments, which are sometimes called station house adjustments. When Peter Harvey, who's now the independent monitor for the consent decree that is entered into between the Department of Justice and the Newark Police Department, when he was the Attorney General in the state of New Jersey, he issued a directive that applied across the entire state that said every police officer is empowered to do a station house adjustment. So a station house adjustment is essentially if there's a child who does something minor, maybe they skip school, maybe they get into an altercation with another child, and they're arrested and they're brought to the station house, to the police office, instead of arresting them and entering them into the system, they can do a station house adjustment. What that means is you call the parents, you call the teachers, you call the guidance counselor, you call the minister, you call their neighbors, you figure out a way to get them back on track, but you don't enter them into the justice system. And that's something that ability to do these station house adjustments exists throughout the entire state of New Jersey. Unfortunately, like Al said, there are again disparities in where those station house adjustments are used. So I think that when we're looking at whether you're gonna have someone, a mistake they made when they were a child, which if you think about it, we all made mistakes as children growing up. It's just a natural part of growing up. Skipping school, doing things like that, minor things, or maybe more serious things. Those mistakes shouldn't follow a person throughout their life, and you shouldn't be something that prevents people from getting an education, getting a job, taking care of their family. So I think that for the bail reform, we really have to be careful about how we do it. I think it's a tremendous step forward because we don't want your economic circumstance to determine how you're treated by the justice system. And I wanted to add, Fatimah brought up the excellent point about the importance of healing and community support for youth that have been involved in the justice system. And if any of you have a moment to go to our website, we have a vision for what the justice system should look like for juveniles in New Jersey. A vision document for what it should look like with Jamesburg and Hayes being closed, where every child, regardless of the color of their skin or their circumstance, receives a community-based system of care and support to make sure they get the resources they need to grow up to be a healthy, happy, successful adult.
All right, I want to do one more question from the podium, and then I want to take and bring it to the audience. And it's where I started out in the beginning about the 21st Century Task Force on Policing commissioned by President Obama and the importance of police going from warriors back to being guardians. Can members of the panel begin to answer that that disparity between those two roles and what it means at a time when we're talking about Black Lives Matter.
If those of you don't know, President Obama did, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, nationally brought leaders from the police and activists together to talk about the state of policing. And through these conversations and those who participated in the 21st Century Policing listening sessions, this document was generated to talk about new standards for the police departments. I can't underscore enough that the activism, the grassroots work, our participation in protest has created an atmosphere in the country that made that possible, and police departments kind of, they're on notice, right? Because we've demanded things. So I want to say that it's not the document that does it, is the demands of people to hold our departments accountable. Mm-hmm. This administration, Trump's administration, is doing everything in its power to undo that work. Mm-hmm. Everything in its power to undo that work at any turn. But what I want to tell you as I talk to departments across the country, that they're talking to one another, right? They're influenced by one another. And what they're essentially saying is, we don't care if the Trump administration wants to give us money to over-police. We're not doing it because we're answerable to the community. They know the cost. No city wants to become the next Ferguson, right? No city wants to be overwhelmed with civil unrest. They know that we are willing to put our bodies in the street, and that's the power of Black Lives Matter. That the cultural change that we are seeing was because of us. And we have to continue to put on pressure. We have an opportunity at the Newark Police Department with this consent decree to make meaningful change for this department. But it means all of us showing up to those meetings to meet with Pete Harvey, who is the independent monitor, and dealing really precisely with the recommendations we have for what we want to see our police department become. Pete Harvey has already worked on use of force policies, and he's now moving into community engagement. How is it that the police engage with communities? What guidance can we give? So I have a couple of things to say about this from what we learned, what we know about the science of this, right? So one of the concerns folks have is about how are police officers selected to even become police? Right? So who are the folks who show up and say, you know what, I'd like to have a gun and put on a uniform and be in a community where I am endowed with the power to do what I need to do to enforce the law? Well, they fall into two categories, right? There are those, and fortunately it's a majority of people who come because they truly want to serve, right? People who come because they actually care. People who are from the community who say, I want to give back. My brother is a police officer, and I know his goal, his reason for doing so was for that reason, right? So I know that there are great people in law enforcement. And then there's another bunch, right? And they score very high on a social dominance scale. They score very high. These are called the hunters, right? These are folks who believe in a social order, they believe in hierarchy, and they really like authority. Well, surprise, surprise, the social dominant, people who score very high on that social dominance scale are far more likely to do egregious misacts in their actual policing practices called procedural justice. Where they give voice and work on trust building and respect of those that they're interacting with. They don't do those things, right? So we know that. So we need to rethink how we're doing screening of officers. It's not just, are you able to jump up a tree, right? Like those physical. It's also, how do you see Black people and how do you understand authority in communities that are vulnerable?
And I think what's important there to note that in the city of Newark, under a time of the consent decree, that people should be very mindful of when those community meetings occur,
yes.
And make sure that you attend. I'm getting a signal from our sponsors that it is time for people in the audience to be able to come up and ask questions as we move to the close of the program. Linda Clark.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Linda McDonald Carter. I teach corrections and prison subculture, and I'm a citizen in the city of Newark. Just want to add real quick, because I know other people want to talk. One is just for the audience to understand, and to the sister who talked about trauma. One, you used the term slavery. We were property. Chattel slavery, that's a big difference. Slavery you can get out of, chattel you'll always be. Just real quick, for purposes of the audience too, police are the front lines when you don't have financial resources. They always have to step in. Also, for those of you who don't know, the police started out as slave catchers, and that has a lot to do with things that happen today. The other thing is that you also have black people who engage in white supremacy, who become tools and actors of white supremacy unknowingly and knowingly. Sometimes the knowingly is selfishness, but we need to keep that in mind. And the other thing is reform is not always good for our community unless we had some say-so. And there's a group that some of you might want to look at, particularly those of you in the audience, called We're All Criminals. And if we all start from the vantage point that we've done something we may not have gotten caught for and see the world from that perspective, it has a whole different mindset. So I just wanted to add that. For the doctor, you talked about the family. I grew up when the community was the family. And so when you talk about just the family, you don't take in consideration all the people who may not have. And I say that as somebody who does adoptions for the state. 98% of the women that I have, nobody stepped in for. And they could not manage their family. So it's very important that it just not be the family, but we as a community need to step in too.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, so I'm not sure if this is a question, it's more of a comment, just in terms of the bail reform that you asked a question about before. There was a meeting recently in our community, and a lot of the community members weren't invited to the meeting. It was very small and contained, but the concern was the fact that there's an algorithm that exists that actually is dictating who goes and who doesn't go to jail. And in many instances, you have an unbalance of, let's say a person has a $500 fine for driving or whatever, they go to the county jail, but you can just have killed somebody and murdered somebody, and depending on whatever number this algorithm mysteriously conjures up, that person is released immediately. And that is the concern that the police was sharing, that is the concern that the prosecutors were sharing, and just as a district leader, I would not have known about it unless the prosecutor's office called me. And I'm just one person in the community. So what I just want everybody to be aware of, and even with the consent decree, because if it's not being funded, like how effective is it gonna be? Right now, I think we're under a time of oppression that we really need to be on point and at these meetings and getting the information bare and raw and hearing the debates and not just taking turns talking, because a lot of the panel discussions, what they're doing, they're just allowing people to individually present the concepts. But no, we need to hear that dialogue back and forth so that it can encourage our critical thought processes and help us to make better decisions for our community as a whole. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to kind of address what the young woman on the end said about municipal adjustments, I think you said.
Station house adjustments.
Station house.
Station house
Station
adjustments.
council, right.
Station house.
Station house adjustments.
Absolutely.
Police station.
These adjustments have been going on in the greater community, and I mean percentage-wise, they've been going on forever. They've been going on forever and forever. And I think that what winds up happening is that they modify that when it comes to other communities. And just a message to the audience to pay attention to, and I won't even say it because this is some homework for everyone to do, pay attention to the youth facilities. I'm talking about the Mountain Views, the Garden States. Pay attention to the percentage of who is incarcerated in these youth facilities and who's not. Okay? Make sure when you go home to check that out. Because what winds up happening is that the society actually adjusts itself. All right? I mean, it's ideological to think that, it's just things are going to just change. Pay attention to disproportionately who is being incarcerated when you're talking about the youth as compared to the population of people that live in Newark and live in Irvington and East Orange and Camden. You have to pay attention because our reaction dictates what's going to happen in the next few years. Just pay attention. That's it.
Can I just make a quick response to him? I just want to say that I've been to I used to work for Peter Harvey, actually. Spent 16 years in our prisons and juvenile facilities. And certainly what he's saying is very correct. But more importantly, we also need to talk about what happens while they are there. We spent a lot of time not only trying to build educational programs for them while I was working for Peter Harvey when he was the Attorney General, and also we spent a lot of time in aftercare and what happens with these young folks when they come out. They have the credentials, and then this whole program about reentry. All of that needs to really be examined. And I do want to go back and make one point, and I'm going to be quiet. I also served on our police academy here up in Cedar Grove for many, many years. And I've always thought that we did not screen police officers enough. It's a very short-term training. It's a very short-term decisions made by a local municipality. I think we need to go back to our elected officials, spend a lot more time talking about what the mental health capacity of these people are. We need to spend a lot of time see what their education is. We need to understand what their culture is, where they come from, and then last and certainly not least, and I'm not knocking where people live, don't get me wrong, but after a certain period of time, they can move out of the community. You see, once they move out of the community, they also have a different feel about the community. So after 3 years in most municipalities, police officers can leave that community. So we need to think about all of that, and it needs to be addressed. And some of this stuff is legislative, but we also have to spend a lot more time dialogue and trying to decide what we want to see our elected officials do. And really, and I got to say this, Loren, I need to be quiet, but one of our problems we have with our elected officials, all of them are experts. When did they ever come back to talk to you? When did they ever come back and have you? Though Senator Lippman, who was like my mother, and she was my mother in many ways, she had a community hearing on whatever the issue was. So when she showed up in Trent, she said, you know what, my people say I can't vote for this. We need to make sure our elected officials, and when you see them, I want you to ask, when y'all come to talk to us about what we doing, talk to the community-based organization leaders. Talk to those who are working in human services every day and every day. They know more about what the legislation is. But you know what? They're down there following everybody else but us. And I'm really got to make this point. I'm very angry about it. And any of you know and watch my television work, I only interview elected officials. So I tell them off campus how I feel off camera how I feel, because it's a damn shame what they've been doing. But anyway, forgive me.
Continue the passion.
I have an actual question. Thank you, panelists.
Just one second. I just wanted to respond to the gentleman.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the gentleman who brought up the racial disparities in the juvenile justice system. So we actually in New Jersey have the worst black-white racial disparities in our juvenile justice system in the entire nation, in the entire country. We're the worst. So we have the worst, they have the worst disparities for the adult system. We have the worst disparities for the juvenile justice system. Right now, if you have a black and white child who get involved in the justice system, the black child is 30 times more likely to be incarcerated. And right now, we have a bit over 200 young people who are in our juvenile justice facilities, and all but a handful of them are kids of color. So when we're talking about closing these facilities, we're talking about also addressing the racial disparities and the fact that these facilities are ineffective, and that there are kids who are currently incarcerated for things that are minor things like shoplifting and truancy. If you look why these kids ended up in the system, it was not because all these kids are kids who can't be saved. All kids can be saved. It's because they didn't have the help and the support they needed at the time. So I would encourage you, if you are interested, I think someone asked about the website. The vision document is at www.njisj.org. And also, I just want to talk about, there are a couple of upcoming community meetings for the consent decree. We're part of the monitoring team, monitoring the implementation of the consent decree. And I just want to let you know, coming up next week, I think we actually have 2 meetings. We have one on Valentine's Day, Wednesday, February 14th, and that's taking place at 1 Lincoln Avenue. We have one on Thursday, February 15th, and that's taking place at 107 Ivy Street. And then on Tuesday, February 27th, we have one taking place at 205 Spruce Street. And if you need more details about any of this, please go to either the website for the monitoring team, or you can go to our website, www.njisj.org.
So she just talked about one being in the West Ward of Vailsburg, one over on Lincoln Avenue, that's in the North Ward, and what was the third street you said? Spruce Street, so that's the Central Ward. So there's 3 locations that are convenient for people to get to. Sir, your question?
Good afternoon again.
Or your
Yeah.
comment?
My question, keep with the forum format, and Dr. Johnson touched on it partially. But oftentimes I come to a lot of these forums, I have my share of time in the community. No one talked about the industry of crime. And it does have to be talked about more, the industry of crime. Now you mentioned that. It's actually an industry in America. Who wants to actually shut down an industry? That's what's driving the whole operation, the industry. You got to feed it, and no one talks about that. So in all your comments, and that's what gives people a better idea how they fit into this thing, that you are being marketed. But we're not talking about that. And I've been to a lot of these forums. Al know personally, a mentor to me. But we got to talk about the industry of crime. And so we got to talk about the industry of crime, I can go away.
So is your question? What's your question?
My question is, why isn't more folks talking about crime as an industry? That's what we're trying to overcome.
It's no doubt it's a big business. It's on Wall Street. I mean, people invest in it. We have it right here in New Jersey. John Clancy, who unfortunately left us recently, but John Clancy had a huge $1 million business doing different types of treatment programs, but they really were young folks that were in prison. They were paid tremendous amounts of money, tremendous amounts of fees, and, you know, there are even those who make predictions who sit around and talk about looking at 4th grade minority boys and saying that we can count on the type of money and business we'll be making based on how many of them will be in prisons in, 10 years. So, it is no question it's a business, and it's sad, and a lot of people are capitalizing on all kind of levels. You don't need to just look at the building and the people who work there, but you need to, and the people who own these private prisons, but you need to look at the suppliers who are supplying them, with food and uniforms. There's so many different levels of money being made off of predominantly, unfortunately, minority males that are in these prisons, and unfortunately, minority women are growing in the prisons too. And we talk a lot more about that. And even in my work, I started to see more and more women coming into the system. Thugging and gang has not only become a trade, but it's become a trademark for other big business. So keep that in mind.
Yes, Dr. Johnson.
Well, I think the point you're making is a very important one. And we incarcerate more people in the United States than any other country in the developed world. And we spend more money on it. The money is absolutely wasted. And you go to upstate New York and you see many small communities that exist because of the prisons that are there. And one of my friends was the commissioner of prisons for the state of New York. She wanted to close prisons, but she had fierce resistance, primarily from the unions and the politicians in those upstate communities who said, our communities will die if you close the prisons. Now, it was just a way of shifting money there. So one of the things we recommended was the state should just go and support the communities, close the prisons, but give jobs to the people who are in those communities. And of course, the Republicans didn't want to do that because they thought it would be, a waste of money. Well, the whole system is a waste of money. So there are, so that's one part of it. I also think there's another part of it, and that part of it is the criminal piece that is built up in the economy that is an underground economy that supports many, many things that we don't even have a clear picture of. So it's a very important way to look at it, but there's a lot of resistance to trying to doing that because of jobs.
We are 5 minutes from the closing of the program, right? And I have 4 questions. Can we take all? And let him have the last word? This gentleman here.
Yeah, me?
Okay.
Okay,
sure.
Number one, the problem in Newark, New Jersey was solved after the 1967 riot with the Kerner Commission and the state laws and what was going on, did the research, and we children witnessed our parents, our friends murdered and killed. And that is going on in this world right now with babies and everything getting shot up and killed in Syria and all kinds of stuff. We had all kind of immigrants down here in Barton Market. We had our own little programs with other immigrants. We working together. But then we young people started understanding that our parents couldn't protect us. So therefore we started talking. We started talking to the Italians, Irish, everybody. We learned we all had one thing in common. Black people in America are indigenous. We never were brought here from nobody else. We were always here. When we look at the world, we see our language in Korea and every place else where we at. So therefore, we begin to understand, so before Roots came in, Alex Hayes' Roots came in, we understood we had to ask some questions. We got our teachers, we got our politicians, and we got our churches. We all ask questions. All the ethnic groups ask questions. And we got some answers. And that answer is money. So therefore, we took our ancient traditions, put them together, and we found out at age 8 to 13, we're supposed to be educated on how to make $1 million as entrepreneurs at 13. Then we learned how to make $1 billion on $1 trillion. Then found out that the reparations that's owed to us, black people, indigenous people in America, is $900 trillion, $999 trillion in gold, silver stuff that's still being coming out this country. Gonna build a pipe here. So the trick here was to put us, get rid of this education so we won't learn how to make money. We got an old population of women, and these preachers keep pushing this stuff, so we dealt with that. And we came up with, look, teachers, if y'all can't teach us how to make $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion, y'all responsible. And that's when we learned about public policy and public law.
Thank you.
Okay? So therefore, that's what you got to talk about. Public policy and public law, and getting these young people to know what's going on. And police brutality, police, who pays their paycheck? Is it taxpayers' money or is it the state?
So do you have a question for the
The question is, why don't y'all work on what I just said, public policy and public law, how to make it, and how to teach these children how to make some money. Can y'all do that?
Okay. Thank you. Yes, next.
You're not.
I am E. Wyman Garrett, MD, and I'm so old I can't even stand at this microphone. And the only person on that sagacious and savant panel to whom I can resort is Dr. Bob Johnson. I have fought this same battle in the city of Newark for over 50 years. My name is on the gym at Westside High School. I am that OG. I'm an original gangster. And I'm here to tell you that we can have all these beautiful panels with all these brilliant things, but young kids want action. Young kids need leaders. People like when I was younger who was out in the streets during the riots. I served on the Board of Education, and my question is, how are you going to relate to the Black Lives Matter young kids? I haven't seen any of them up here. I don't see any. I don't know if that's Al Bundy, my friend. That's how damn hard trouble I have seen. But I don't see any young black kids from Black Lives Matter here discussing, telling you what they want, not what you want for them. And that is my question. And Bob, I think that's you, but I was fighting back during the time when he was a medical student. That's how old I am, at UMD&J. Now, whether he remembers me, I don't know. But
Ernie Garrett's one of the people who taught me medicine. So you see how young I am. Ernie said, thank you, and really one of the pioneers that did a great deal for the city of Newark. And he just quickly mentioned that the gym at Westside High School has his name on it. The reason it has his name on it is he was one of the people leading those youth in this community. So thank you very much for your contributions, Ernie.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I actually have two questions, and they're quick.
Pick your most important, if you can.
Well,
we're trying to wrap
black
up.
women's lives are important, that pregnant women.
Okay.
And it's also important that we turn out at our freeholders meetings as a unit of Black Lives Matters, that we show up. The freeholders meeting is once a month because of all the topics you've been talking about. So I wanted to get the opinion of what difference that makes showing up at the meetings, following up on all the other statements rather than questions. But importantly, at these meetings to talk about, and I'll lead my question in because Dr. Johnson, it says here that you were a member of the NIH AIDS Research Council, and I've had the experience of going down to DC and being there for one of their symposiums, and it was all about maternity care. across the state, and how women our maternity care has gotten worse over the last 20 years rather than better, and we're now on a third world country. Of industrialized nations, we have more women dying and being harmed during childbirth than any other country, and as women of color are dying at 3 times the rate of women who aren't. And a lot of that was brought up at the NIH conference, and they were like, oh, we don't want to talk about racial disparity. That was on the first day. But the third day, it was all about New Jersey, because I did raise the question why we have such horrible maternity care at the top of the state where we're most populated, and it got better within World Health Organization guidelines. So I think your opinion on the NIH, because it affects everyone in this room, regardless of what race you are. They come out with statistics that are heavily influenced, in my personal opinion, on the players, the money makers involved. So that's my opinion. I'd like to hear your opinion on that and the other panel.
Dr. Johnson or anyone else, and she also spoke to the importance of attending freeholder meetings, which I think, Al, you kind of covered that in your remarks about making elected and appointed officials accountable. Dr. Johnson?
Well, attending meetings is very important. The National Institute of Health is an entity funded by the federal government to do research into health problems. Perinatal mortality rate actually throughout the world is getting better. However, the United States has a poor perinatal mortality than many other countries throughout the world. The reasons for that are multiple, and many of them are directly related to race and left related to the socioeconomic disparities. Then the same things that drive higher rates of substance abuse, higher rates of STDs, higher rates of incarceration, all of those things are the same things that drive these high rates of perinatal mortality. There were moves during the Obama administration to do things that had a positive impact. The greatest one was affordable health care. There are moves during the Trump administration that are going to reverse that. And so I think that what we're going to see in the next 4 or 5 years is going to get worse and worse and worse. And unless we have leadership at the top that actually cares about people, especially black and brown people, we're not going to get any positive response.
Okay, our final question of the day.
Hi, I'm on the board of an organization, Newark, called FP Youth Outcry, and our executive director couldn't be here today, but he's been very focused on the Victims of Crime Act and how this proportionate amount of funds flow out of cities, in fact, to help victims of crime's families. So we were actually conditionally approved for a grant with Victims of Crime Act, and so if anybody's interested in the trauma recovery work that FPU does in the city currently with their My Thoughts Out Loud program, I'd be happy to speak with you more, or also about the future plans for this trauma recovery center. But we talked a lot about trauma, and I thought, and we've been talking a lot about disproportionate effects. Could someone on the panel kind of share with the audience more about some of the disproportionate amount of funds and why disproportionate funds for victims of crime flow from cities to different areas?
Yes, so Fatimah, are you working with Elizabeth Rubin?
Yes.
On this? Okay.
Yes,
and we've been working with Equal Justice.
Yes, we helped Future Potential Youth Outcry secure those funds, and we're really proud of that. In the country, there's over $3 billion that can actually support healing and safety for our people. And it's a fund called from the Victims of Crime Act. The funds actually came from criminal behavior, white collar crime. They would pay fees that would go into this fund. And there are leaders, states across this country have been asleep at the wheel. The state of New Jersey gave back to the federal government tens of millions of dollars that could have gone to invest in education programs that actually support young youth-led organizations, and they do not promote that these grants are available. They actively create barriers to getting it, and what we've done is we've created a toolkit. So, and if you have an organization that's interested in and looking at these funds, we can help you actually retool your work to ensure maybe tracking the kinds of victims who are, because many of us are victims, right? So you could be running a food kitchen, let's say, and have victims and actually qualify for these funds. So even if you're not quite thinking about, well, I don't know how this relates, we actually help you get these grants. We've raised over $3.6 million for local groups across the country. And in the state of New Jersey, I think it's about $1 million we've helped in terms of grant writing for groups, and there is so much more we can do. So if you have any questions about this or interest, please come talk to me. We have people on staff who actually help you write these grants. Equal Justice USA, EJUSA.org, and I have my card here to give you.
Yeah, I failed to tell you that the American Black Male Leadership Institute, please visit our website at abmli.com. We are in the business of changing the narrative about black males. We are committed to making sure that more of them have control over their own destiny and are able to make a more positive contribution to their family and to their community. American Black Male Leadership, abmli.com. Please visit our website. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to all of you who stayed and saw us through. And don't forget, no matter what anyone says, Black lives do matter, and let's continue the movement. Thank you.
How are you? Good to see you.